Okay.
And then you can roll into Chardonnay and Orange.
Right.
How about that?
I'm pressing live on Instagram. It's checking connection.
Oh no, technical issues.
We going?
We're good. All right. Hi everyone. Welcome to the Friday afternoon Printhie tasting. 4 p.m. on Good Friday. So happy Easter, everybody. Thank you very much for taking some time out of your isolation time, hopefully with some family, to join us for a tasting. You'll see that we are not in the packing shed today for those that have logged in before.
We've relocated because you wouldn't read about it, but 2 Fridays in a row it's been pouring with rain here, and we decided to take shelter and go somewhere more comfortable.
So we're hoping the sound for those who logged in last week is a little better than it was previously. As we said, Easter Friday, so we've had a lovely day. Ed and I, it's a family affair here today for you, those who are joining us. We have been isolating together and working together all week, so
that's why we can sit
this distance
slightly inside the required distance.
Yeah. Really excited to be sharing some Chardonnay with you today. It's a variety that we love and is a big part of what we do and what we do in Orange. It's my favourite variety.
I think you put that out there 2 weeks ago.
I did.
Yep, that this was the wine that you is your go-to.
It is. So if I can't deliver this, I can't deliver anything.
No. So hold on to your hats. If you watched last week where Drew and Dave went for 40 minutes, he might go for longer today. No, we are going to make a concerted effort today to go a bit shorter because it didn't waffle. You know, there's lots of good stuff. There was a lot of good stuff in there. But we are going to make an effort to kind of keep on track this time. We do have our very good assistant behind the cameras again, who's got some pretty firm instructions on how to keep
things rolling,
moving through the script today. So
I will just add quickly, we've got a real mixture of people tuning in today. Some feedback that we've had last week. So we've got those of you that have the wines, the tasting pack. Look forward to tasting through the wines with you. Clearly, there are going to be a group of people there who don't have the wines in front of you, which is fine.
I believe most of those people just tuning in for the witty repartee.
Great idea.
Yeah.
And we do also have someone celebrating their birthday today.
It's
Sarah and Jess Maddock.
Oh, I was about to say a couple of conversations this week, and there were a couple of sisters, I assume sisters.
Yep.
One in Adelaide, one in Melbourne, who bought some wines to
Brisbane, Melbourne,
Adelaide.
Doesn't matter.
To buy some wines to taste together. So it's a real mix. We've got trade for those of you in the restaurant trade, and we feel for you. Some retailers logging in, some distributors of ours. So we're hi to everybody. Very happy to have you with us on a Friday afternoon.
One of the things we might do today is discuss the Chardonnays that we have in front of you, and the sort of the backstory for those and how they got to be where they are and the styles and whatnot. But we won't get too deep and technical, I would suggest. However, saying that, if you do have a more in-depth question or something that perhaps this isn't the forum for, send them through, because we can certainly respond later on back to you directly.
But we encourage you to ask questions.
Please. So the idea,
absolutely.
Exactly. The idea here and the way we want to format this is a similar experience to the cellar door. So, the idea of being able to stand and sit with us and taste through our wines and engage. So please ask questions, and we'll obviously read them out if they're suitable for the time. And we'll try to keep the flow of things going so that you're getting some information, but also learning a little bit about what we do and who we are.
So Chardonnay in Orange is probably one of the most consistent, best varieties that we grow here. It's certainly, as Dave mentioned, one of the ones that we really enjoy making. We probably take Chardonnay from, just a quick count, 7 or 8 different sites around the region of various elevations, and you'll hear us often talk about elevations and different sites. because that's kind of the really important part about making wine in orange. It's about selecting that right variety in the right site, and so Chardonnay grows across nearly all elevations really well in orange.
But it's fair to say too, I mean, Chardonnay is probably the most reliable variety across Australia.
Yeah, very much so.
It grows in warm, hot climates, it grows in cool climates, it really is very reliable.
Yeah. And we go looking for certain blocks of Chardonnay to suit certain purposes, and I guess today we've got two wines here that represent what we call our mountain range, which is our retail in that around $22, and then our new topography series, which is in $32.
Depending where you're buying, obviously.
Yeah,
Cellar doors $32, but depending on your local retailer.
So they're designed to do different things and suit different palates. But the thing about Chardonnay and orange, which is what makes it really unique, is this elevation range and its consistency across the region. And we probably see at the local wine show, we would see the Chardonnay class, certainly the biggest class in terms of number of wines entered, and probably the largest number of medals awarded in that class as well. So it's certainly a variety that likes the climate. It's a variety that does very well here. Add to that the fact that we really enjoy making Chardonnay and drinking good Chardonnay from lots of different places around Australia, but particularly cool climate styles, I guess, is where our preferences lie. And so we actually put Chardonnay into 3 different table tiers.
Correct, and then
sparkling,
4 different sparklings.
There's a sparkling in the mountain range. And then there's some other sparklings as well. So Chardonnay probably goes into more.
By volume, it is by far and away the largest variety that we take into the winery.
Yeah.
But it is spread across
a lot of products.
Many different products, yeah.
But it's certainly, and we keep rabbiting on about cool climate styles, and certainly the Chardonnay very much, despite the fact that it grows, as you said, in lots of different places, the characteristics that we get in a cool climate are really fantastic and differ quite a lot to the warmer inland climates. And as a general rule, we see a lot of fruit and we use a little bit less oak and those sorts of things. So
I think the best way to explain that is we go through the wines.
Yeah,
we'll give an indication of the importance of elevation and style.
Yeah.
And that in orange, elevation changes temperature as well. So it's a good illustration of what it does. So a little bit about Chardonnay and orange. So for those who have some wines with them, we're going to start with the mountain range, which is this one here.
The big red circle.
Which is our entry-level Chardonnay. So this is what we term our mountain range is 7 varietals. We have a sparkling in the mountain range. We do a Sauvignon Blanc, a Pinot Gris, and a Chardonnay, a Merlot, Shiraz, and a Cabernet. So all straight varietals. The idea of the mountain range is more an aperitif in style. They are wines that have lovely fruit freshness and forwardness. That can be drunk without food. So in our market, we sell a lot of these into bars and pubs and wines by the glass.
I'd describe these as being very bright and fresh and clean. Correct. In their style. These don't get a lot. The mountain range doesn't get a lot of barrel fermentation, for example. In fact, I think this one is 100% fermented in tank, and what that does is that it keeps that fruit vitality and freshness and gives it a real bright sort of lift.
Now the key about this wine is it's a blend of a number of different vineyard sites in orange, ranging in elevation. So as I said, we rabbit on a lot about elevation, and we'll continue to throughout this tasting. The reason we blend, one is for volume. It's a larger volume product of ours in the mountain range, but also stylistically, we're looking for a wine that has multiple tiers and layers of complexity through varying elevations. So in basic terms, the lower you are in orange,
We've just had a request that bunnies are in the way.
So in basic terms, the lower you are in orange, so that is closer to the 600 metre contour that is the baseline for the orange region, the more richness and fruit ripeness that you'll get out of the Chardonnay.
They tend to be a little bit broader on the palate.
Correct.
A bit more robust.
Whereas the higher we go, the more aromatic intensity and acid structure and brightness we get to the wine. So this wine in particular is a blend of a number of different vineyard sites so that we essentially get that outcome we're after. So the lower portion is adding that richness to the wine, whereas the higher elevation brings it natural brightness and freshness. So it's meant to retain that lovely freshness.
It's certainly not too early in the day to be...
No, in fact, it's taken me some time to wait this long.
Yeah.
It's been a difficult...
I think today, actually, most people could have gone a bit earlier.
Yes.
I think we could have
you've
scheduled
already
this
drunk
at about
these
midday.
in hindsight.
Yeah.
So as Ed was saying, I'll just a little bit about the oak. The oak here is in the background. So you'll see as we jump into the topography, oak plays a bigger part in the role of this wine, whereas here the fruit structure and balance of the wine is doing a lot of the work.
Historically, and this I'm going to get a big wind up here from behind the camera. Historically, Australia's reputation was built on these big, robust, golden styles of Chardonnays that came through the 80s and 90s. And that's about as far away from the types of Chardonnays that we make today, particularly in a cool climate region like Orange. I mean, we want to see the juice out of the press at vintage time running clear as water. You know, we don't want any colour whatsoever in there. And then that leads on to, you know, more pure flavours and characteristics down the track. So if you're a fan of big oaky buttery Chardonnays from eons ago, that's a long way from what we produce today. But I would argue that we produce wines of more elegance and better balance and more finesse.
And you see that here, it's got a lovely lemony, citrusy character to it. There's a zestiness to the wine, which is essentially in Orange tied a lot to that acidity of the wine.
So and I think a lot of that too is back in the day when we were producing these big bold styles, we were ripening the fruit a lot more too. So the fruit was a lot sweeter when we were picking it, so we're getting higher alcohols, we were getting more influence from the colour and the berry and on the skin. And so now that we pick a bit earlier, and I don't know what the alcohol on this one is, 13. But now that we pick a bit earlier, we tend to get these lovely, that's you know,
quite
probably
clear,
quite clear, quite pale. It's got a bit of a strawy, sort of almost a greeny kind of hint to it, and that sort of really exemplifies that cool climate style for me.
The nice thing here
could I just jump in there quickly? Is it true that cooler climate Chardonnay fruits have more citrus flavours?
We definitely see more citrus style flavours in our Chardonnays. And what we tend to find is the higher up we go in the region, so more towards the 1,000 metre, 900 and above metre elevation range is where we start to see more of those citrus.
A nice way to think about citrus, and this actually came from a producer we know in Champagne, but is in terms of white and yellow fruits. So when I talk about white fruits, they tend to be more in the blossom spectrum. So you get that lovely citrus blossom characteristic, a lovely perfume lift to it. And we see a lot of that in Riesling and Orange. Whereas when we turn into the yellows, you get more of that lemon, lime, zesty characteristic. Yeah. So, and depending where you are, and there are a number of other factors in that, clonal selection, elevation, rootstocks, there are a lot of things that will change that. But essentially, they tend to be categorised into that floral side or the very much that lemon zest.
And where does the texture come from in the Chardonnay?
Texture, I mean, Chardonnay is a textural variety anyway. Obviously, the riper you pick it, the more texture you'll get.
We can do a lot of work in the winery too, post sort of pressing and that sort of stuff. And if we leave some of the yeast lees and the solids in the wine for periods of time, we tend to see a more textural wine, you know, off the back of that.
So yeast lees, and just for those, obviously there's a mix of those consumers, drinkers joining us with. Lees are essentially just the solids and the dead yeast cells that are sitting in the barrel post fermentation. So they are what builds that creamy texture and texture in the wine, and so we can control that.
Yeah,
and this is a good example. How heavy or light.
This is a good example. The mountain range isn't an overly textural wine. It's quite a bright, fresh, zingy style, and that is because we take it off its yeast gross lees pretty early, so we don't leave a lot of that behind. to let that texture kind of take hold in the wine, as opposed to the next wine that does get some lees work and is made in quite a different fashion. Yeah. So we can probably go to that.
Absolutely. So anyway, if you like that, please leave comments. Please ask questions. As Em said, or we commented before, anything we don't get to, we will come back and answer your questions depending on whether you're on Instagram or Facebook, but we will not ignore them. We will answer in time, so please feel free to share.
We do have another two. We've got, how does orange Chardonnay differ from other regions of Australia and the rest of the world?
There's a broad question.
That's quite a broad question.
I'll answer quickly while Ed's pouring. For me, like every region should have a style and a characteristic that comes through. What we are seeing, interestingly enough, is orange is starting to show quite a unique style of Chardonnay. And I think it was the first variety in orange where through different producers there was a commonality that came through. So we're seeing through the use of oak, the style of the fruit and the flavours and the fruit styles that we're making. Orange is quite unique in terms of Chardonnay because of our elevation.
Yeah.
And that's really what sets it apart. They are medium bodied, they're not big heavy styles. They've got a lovely fruit forwardness, so you see a lot of that freshness of fruit and then good acids. So they for me, stylistically, if you're going to put it in on the world spectrum, they're more Chablis in style often than they are Burgundy. So
and a lot of that, when you look around Australia, we essentially categorise our viticultural areas into warm climate or cool climate. Now, almost to an area, every other cool climate region tends to be quite south of us here in Orange and relatively close to the coast, but a long way south. So Orange is quite unique in that we're quite high, which is unusual.
With high UV too, so we get lovely ripeness in the fruit fairly early in the ripeness. So they don't have to. Chardonnay doesn't have to hang for a long time. So hang, I mean by ripening on the vine for a long time to get lovely fruit flavours. So we don't have to get really high alcohols to get a lot of flavour out of the wines.
And now, will the Mountain Range Chardonnay cope with cellaring?
Well, I was actually going to mention that. These are both 2018s.
They are.
And some years ago, we, by preference, would age the wines before release. Unfortunately, fortunately through popularity, but also the market pushing producers to releasing newer, fresher styles, I believe Chardonnay and Orange actually benefits from a little bit of time. This in particular, the Mountain Range, to me, just continues to look better and better because of that age. The fruit and the oak really soften in together.
And saying that, we certainly make them in a style that can be enjoyed and drunk as a young wine. And so that's our 18, but that's how long have we been selling that? 20 years. We've been selling it for 9 months or so.
So normally, I mean, in this range, in the Mountain Range, generally things turn over within that 12-month period. The nice thing is, and variability from season to season, some years we have bigger crops, and that leaves us a chance to roll things out a little bit longer. So I actually think this wine is benefiting and will continue to benefit from a couple of years of age.
Now, we've got a question about the barrels that you use from Justin on Facebook. Do you use a specific type of oak barrels for your Chardonnay versus your red wines? Are they from France? And if so, do you try to source this from coopers who use specific forests in that country?
The oak selection for all our wines is very specific and is tailored just to that wine that we're talking about. So the barrels that would get used for the topography Chardonnay will be different than the barrels that get used for the topography Shiraz. They may be different coopers, they may be the same cooper, but they'll be certainly from different forests, different parts of France. Different toasting levels, different type grain, as opposed to there's an awful lot that goes into barrel selection.
We could spend an hour and a half just talking about this if everyone liked. That'd be.
And one of the things, and we will get onto it on the next wine, is we have actually seen a bit of a shift in the last couple of years in our barrel use and the style of barrels that we're using. Not so much the oak itself, but the size. And we'll talk about it on the topography because it was something that we had listed down to.
So the simple
about.
And just distill that down. The simple answer on that is yes, very much so. We use unique barrels, all French on oak. We don't use American oak at all on Chardonnay. And they are really tailored from a specific forest cooper to a specific product. And year in year, we're trying to refine that more and more.
I can see myself getting a bit of a move on here, but when we first started making wine, we essentially got a lot of the barrels that were kind of left over from the Northern Hemisphere vintage. They'd ship them all out to Australia and you could pick through what was left, and some would line up and some weren't so great. There's been a real shift in the last probably 5 or 6 years. We now see the head guys from the, that own these cooperages now out in Australia every year that want to come and see you, that want to taste the wine that you're trying to make. What are you trying to achieve? What's the style that you're hoping to aim for, and how can we help you get that? And so they're actually starting to tailor barrels specifically for specific producers. So which is a mammoth shift. Like back in the day, it was very much you just use what's left over.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, topography. Chardonnay. I'm going to step away from Chardonnay just briefly to explain a little bit about topography as a range.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The important thing here, so this is the topography for those that are at home and you have the label at home. Topography came around at about for us a number of years ago. We sat down as a family and as a business to discuss what we felt were the most important criteria in terms of wine style in Orange, because we wanted a brand and a range of...
Oh, I'm sorry. Are you still going?
Honestly. A range of wines.
I
can't believe what's wrong with him. You really put me off now. I don't know. A range of wines that would tell the story of Orange and what we were trying to achieve from the region. And the one thing that we kept coming back to was elevation. So topography for us is the number one criteria or key to style choice and stylistic change between wines within the region. So the range itself has a number of different wines. They are all single vineyard wines from different vineyards throughout the region. Now, some of those are our vineyards. In fact, 4 of those vineyards we either own or lease ourselves, but there are a number of other vineyard sources that we specifically choose because of either their elevation. So the label itself depicts a cross-section of the Orange region from the most northerly to most southerly point. There is a scale on the label, so it is completely true to scale. It is then overlaid with a geological survey of the region. So in order of importance, elevation, which influences temperature, rainfall, all manner of things.
It gives us a lot of aspect difference.
Correct, and then soil. So the label itself really is telling that story around those individual sites. So I will stop talking now, so nobody goes to sleep.
One of the interesting parts about this Chardonnay is that if you'll recall in 2018, this is actually an unusual fruit source for this wine.
It's a one-off.
It's a one-off, which back in vintage 2018, we didn't talk about it too much, and in the light of the summer that we've just had, we won't talk about it too much longer either. But we did have a very isolated bushfire here late in the season, and it actually affected one of our primary vineyard sources for Chardonnay. And at the time, it was quite devastating because the entire vineyard, whilst it wasn't burnt, it was very much affected by smoke. And we made the decision as early as we could to substitute the fruit that went into this wine from another fruit source that we already had. And the year that we chose and the site that we chose was actually where, if you're on last week's tasting when we were talking about sparkling, it was from the sparkling vineyard where we sourced the fruit for our sparkling. So we actually spoke to the grower who grows that for us, and we, instead of picking it early for sparkling wine, we kept it on the vine longer and grew it out to a table wine stage. So that is very unusual for this.
Yeah, so the long and the short of that is that this is the only time we've ever made a still wine from this vineyard. It has been the home of Swift Sparkling for many, many years, in fact 10 years this year. And so it is a little bit out of the box. It's not something we would normally do because selection of oak, all manner of things are varied based on vineyard source and stylistic. But because we'd had experience with that fruit for 10 years, we felt confident that we could still deliver the product we were after. So, subsequent vintages of this wine come from the Wattleview Vineyard, which is a vineyard we lease, which is actually the highest Chardonnay vineyard in Orange. So
we believe it's the highest in
no, we
Australia.
don't believe that at all.
No, we don't.
No, that's been defunct
No, right.
or bunked.
I'm going to jump in with a question. Can people buy our wines in New Zealand? That's from Greg.
Oh.
New Zealand. Hi, Greg.
The sad answer to that is no, Greg. No, simply put.
Unfortunately.
Watch this space.
We could arrange some sort of swap, I reckon.
We could.
For something from New Zealand.
Yeah. Correct. So let's talk about topography Chardonnay. Stylistically, this is a wine. This is right in the zone of the style of wine I like. You can see immediately on the nose the oak influence comes through. So this wine is, without getting too technical about it, we're looking for quality. So we handpick. It's pressed really gently so that we don't want too much phenolic, which is that bitterness that comes through in the wine. So
tends to come from the skin, so that's why we press softly.
Really gently. It's fermented in barrels, combination of sizes. Ed mentioned barrel size being important here. We're actually shifting. This wine is actually primarily in puncheons, which are 500 litre barrels.
Yeah. There's a few standard sizes. A barrel or a barrique is 225. We used to use hogsheads at 300 litres. And we're now making quite a shift up to puncheons, which are 500 litre.
Correct. And since 2018, we've actually moved up again to 3,500 litre Foudre. So the reason for that, essentially, when you've got really delicate fruit, so generally speaking, it's really high elevation. This itself is still 890 metres above sea level, so it's high elevation anyway. You've got a lovely purity of fruit, and too much oak or coarseness of oak can knock that fruitfulness out of it. So the larger the vessel, the oak vessel, the lower the impact and the percentage of contact with oak on the wine. So we get a better integration of oak.
One of the things that happens really quickly with cool climate styles of wine is that we see the oak just sit clean over the fruit, and the fruit's like the best feature often that we have. So we're very careful with oak usage, and it's why we've made this progression into larger format styles, because as Dave said, it's the surface to volume ratio, or some sort of technical,
That's very technical.
Yeah. Put simply, the larger the oak format, the less punch and impact it has on the wine, which is what we like. We like balance. We like just the right amount in the right spot.
So here, the idea is that you get a wine with more texture. Oak gives texture as well. We get a wine with more texture, a touch of savouriness, a touch of spice, which is that French oak. But underlying that, you've still got that lovely citrus. You've got that pithy, sort of grapefruit pithiness.
There's a bit of
some lovely stone fruity characteristic.
And some lemon zesty stuff going
on. So stylistically, that's what we want in orange. If you're seeing melons, typically speaking, the fruit is too ripe for orange. Stylistically, it's not problematic. Just in our region, melons tend to push, I think, ripeness a little bit too far.
Agreed.
Good.
Now we've had some offers of bartering.
Oh, good.
Swapping a case of wine for a road bike from Greg Napstein.
Done.
Is it your Fondriest, Greg? Which one are we swapping?
Yeah.
I'll swap for the Stel Bell.
I'm sure that means something to cyclists. But
a question from Fiona on Facebook. Out of all your wines that you produce, which is the best-selling one?
Good question.
Do you know, whilst we're talking about Chardonnay, the answer is not Chardonnay.
No.
But I'm being very pleased to see that Chardonnay is certainly on a resurgence.
Completely.
We're seeing a lot more interest in Chardonnay, and I think that's due to the newer styles and the.
So Ed, answer the question. What's our best-selling wine?
Pinot Gris is our biggest selling.
Typically speaking, given we make styles that are cool climate, so they tend to, and what people tend to be drinking at the moment, high acid wines. Sauvignon Blanc was our previous largest selling wine some years ago, and it's now transitioned into Pinot Gris, which is pretty standard with what's happening in the marketplace, to be honest. But Chardonnay isn't far behind, which is lovely. And if you ask me, if what I would like to make more of,
Chardonnay.
These wines here.
It's certainly one of the wines, when people arrive at the cellar door, it's not so easy in this situation, but I always ask people if there's something that they would like to try or would not like to try. And there's only a couple of wines that people always say they don't want to try. It's either Sauvignon Blanc or it's Chardonnay. And if someone says Savvy, I tend to let that go. But if they say Chardonnay, I pretty much force it upon them.
Pour it anyway.
To try it. Because I say if you don't like it, you can tip it out. And I would say 9 out of 10 times people taste it and go, do you know what? That wasn't what I was expecting. And it's normally been someone who's been, horrendously affected by
Chardonnay's come a
old
long way
school
in the last few
Chardonnay.
years,
Yeah,
correct.
yeah.
Now, the only other thing we should talk about in terms of Chardonnay, and then I'm looking at the clock too. We are right on track for that
Rabbiting
45 minute.
Yeah, rabbiting on.
The only thing we should talk about is malolactic fermentation. So that is the conversion of malic acid to lactic acid, which is a softer, the same acidity in milk. It's a softer acid. Now, Chardonnay was famous for malo, malolactic fermentation.
For short malo.
And it's what creates that butteriness, that lactic flavour.
If you have a Chardonnay and you see it's very broad and buttery, creamy, that sort of characteristic, that's often a malolactic characteristic. And I would suggest that wine has had 100% of the fruit that ended up in the wine go through that process.
The reason I bring it up, because stylistically in cool climates, we use very little of it. So we convert, obviously we do some, but it's barrel by barrel until we get a lovely softness to the acidity, but we want that freshness. So we tend to go very low.
Yeah, we want that palate to drive to the back and carry that fruit and carry that flavour. And that tends to be diminished the more malo characteristic. You get more breadth and robustness, but you get less length and drive.
So everyone, that is Chardonnay, mountain range topography. We are open to questions.
Now, Eugene on Instagram is wondering if the topography has wild yeast. No.
Good question.
That's range, I believe, we do start.
Yeah, listen, we do obviously natural fermentations. We also use inoculated yeast, commercial yeast, depending on the style of the wine we're making. So the wine here is there is always a portion of, essentially. We let some barrels go, but we also like to control in a little bit of a way the outcome.
Very much so.
And so typically, if you go back to the mountain range, the barrel fermentation component is all about freshness and vibrancy. So that is inoculated, whereas anything in barrel we tend to let just go and see how it rolls.
One of the
there's faces coming from the camera.
A couple of questions from Mark on Facebook. Where does the topography sit versus the MCC range? Which I think is a good question.
That's an excellent question, Mark. This actually replaces the MCC range of wines, and there's a little bit of vintage changeover of various things, but the 2017 version of this was an MCC, and the 18, this is the first of the topography series.
There are a number of products that were moved into topography, so Chardonnay and Shiraz being the two obvious ones, and Riesling. There were also a number of additions. So under topography, we also now do a Cabernet, which we'd never done in an MCC or above.
Riesling?
No, Riesling was an MCC.
Oh, was it already? Yeah.
And the other probably notable one is a Pinot Meunier.
Yep.
Instead of Pinot Noir,
we should probably have we should have a Pinot.
We'll have a Pinot tasting.
Gris Meunier.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Maybe that rosé, maybe.
Questions?
And which Printhie wine is your favourite?
Oh, this was asked last week, and I'm gonna mix it up. I'm gonna change.
I don't know if you can do that. Can you change?
Well, I changed my shirt. This is my favourite today. So,
right. What's
people have noted that you're not wearing your
Printhie
shirt.
Specifically.
We did have a conversation.
Mine at the moment actually is the Topography Shiraz, which we'll be tasting. Yeah, it's not a coincidence that we're tasting that next week. It just happens to be that it's been colder this week, and I pulled a few bottles out, and it's got a few extra years on it.
Yep.
And I actually just think it's one of those wines that has really flourished.
We've actually been drinking a bit of the Pinot Meunier lately.
Yeah.
It's been going well. What did we have? We had something the other day, and I said Minestrone.
Perfect match.
Minestrone and Pinot Meunier. I know that's Italian and French, but
anyway.
And where does the Super Duper sit?
Above. So the Super Duper is our flagship. It's not Generally, we're not putting it in the tasting packs because of its price, and we want to encourage as many people to get involved as possible. But there is a super duper Chardonnay, so that would be the tier above what we're drinking here today.
It's also, I think there's a stylistic commonality
Yeah.
between these two wines. I think the super duper Chardonnay in particular is quite a bit out of the box. It's a very, we spoke about more robust styles. Whilst it's still in a more modern style, it is a very robust style of wine. It's got a lot of punch. It was 100% in new oak. So it's a wine that's made to last and needs a bit of cellaring. And I think the current release is 13 or 14.
Yeah.
So we've done a bit of that anyway. But it's certainly a fantastic wine, but it is a little bit different to these.
We've
So guys,
had a lot of interest in doing a tasting on the Pinot Meunier, so we'll definitely schedule that in soon and watch
We
socials.
are going to. In the next week, we'll probably put something out on the Facebook and Instagram about what the follow-up tastings will be.
Yep.
So anybody who's interested can then buy the wines for those.
for those who don't have the wines, you can also go back on the Facebook and they're on YouTube and watch. So if the tasting pack will stay on there, so you're welcome to buy and go back retrospectively and watch the tastings and taste with us. But yes, as Ed said, early next week we'll have the next tasting pack.
The other thing we're going to do is do a special code for the website for this weekend for those people who are,
if you're loving your Chardonnay,
watching this now and want to buy some. We're going to do a code Friday tasting, and it'll go up in the next little bit. That'll give you a 15% discount on any of the. Actually, it'll be across the
website and free shipping as well.
Yeah,
so
free shipping. And
if you're enjoying what you're drinking, please.
Greggy, if you just want to do, instead of doing that, you put free Stell Bell, that'll be fine too.
So that's Friday tastings is the coupon.
Friday tasting.
Tasting.
Yep.
And there was another query about what's your opinion on intervention with wines?
Ooh.
Everybody settle in. So, horses for courses. I think there's a place for both sides here. And these are really good. This is a really good example of that. Mountain range for us is about repeatability, consistency of style, creating wines for people that enjoy stylistically that style, and they know that they'll go in and buy that week in, week out, and know that they'll get a certain quality from us and Orange. Topography is more of a minimal intervention style wine.
And it's something we'd like to see a little bit of vintage variation.
Correct.
We'll make decisions along the way to ensure that stylistically it's heading in the right direction, but I want the 18 to look different to the 16. And because that's part of the story.
The important thing there is to note too, though, we don't intervene when we don't need to. And so we only do the bare minimum required to create the wine
that
sits in your
before
glass.
you.
So
right.
when we say we're doing a lot with the Mountain Range Chardonnay, really, some goes into tank. It gets a really clean ferment to give freshness. The rest goes into barrel. We let it sit, very little lees stirring because we don't want a lot of that creaminess and too much texture. We want that freshness. So really, there's not a lot to the wine making. In fact, I reckon winemakers are pretty damn lazy.
I'm not sure now that you mention that. I don't know what they've been doing.
No. All right, everyone. Unless there's any more questions, we are officially around 7 minutes shorter than we were last week, so we're getting better and better in terms of
really cutting this down. We're really getting to the nub of it, aren't we?
We thank you all for taking some time out of your Easter Good Friday. Funny, odd time of the world that we're in, but we do appreciate.
We'd love to see everybody at the cellar door one day, but in the meantime, this is nice too. I feel.
I guess also listen to us.
Whilst we can't hug,
spread the word. One of the good things that has come out of, or a silver lining that's come out of this, is that we the amount of contact and the number of people who have been involved in these is really
it's been
kind
very
of impressed me. So it's something we'll continue to do. So please log in and ask your friends to come along too.
Yeah, and just last word, there's free delivery on any orders. So if you want to get a bottle or 256 bottles, that's fine too. And yeah, look out for the announcement on what the following tastings will be for the next
But we've
round.
got Shiraz next week.
Shiraz is next week.
Next
4
Friday,
o'clock
sorry.
next Friday, and I reckon we should call that quits at 40 minutes.
Yep.
Thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your Easter.
Stay safe.
Cheers.
Bye.
Is it off?
I can't reach the button.
How'd we go, Emma? Now that we've got them open, we should just finish them off. Cat didn't move. Anybody mention the cat?
No, I saw the cat. Oh, we had 52 viewers on Instagram.